How different would U.S. foreign affairs be if the U.S. never entered World War II? The United States is known for its presence around the globe today. However, this was not always the case. In fact, George Washington had warned of the dangers of foreign entanglements in his farewell address in 1796. Nearly 200 years later, the events of the 20th century, a century filled with war and conflict, forcefully molded U.S. foreign policy from one of isolation to one of intervention. Historians have claimed that when the U.S. got involved in World War II, it gave the Allied powers the much-needed assistance they needed to win the war. The Allied powers triumphed over the Axis powers, the atomic bomb was invented, and a new rivalry began to take root which would result in the Cold War. After the dust settled, two superpowers emerged from the ashes, the Democratic Republic of the United States and the Communist Soviet Union. Both parties waged an ideological war against each other through their actions and involvement around the globe. The U.S. sought to spread its interests and ideals while containing and suppressing the spread of communism. Fear of communist progression prompted the U.S. to stave off and quarantine its growth. In order to contain communism, the U.S. carried out several crucial actions such as implementing the Truman Doctrine, which stated the U.S. would support nations threatened by communism, enacting the European Recovery Program, which promised and provided financial aid to a war-torn Europe for it to rebuild, conducting the Berlin Airlift, which supplied West Germany and had a part in founding the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the United Nations, two of the most arguably powerful alliances in the world. These actions prevented communism from spreading into Europe. Furthermore, the U.S. supported any government that resisted and rejected communism and its values regardless of the government structure. For example, the U.S. supported the Greek loyalists who supported the monarchy in their struggle against the Greek communists in the Greek Civil War by providing them financial aid through the European Recovery Program, which is referred to as the Marshall Plan. On a similar note, the U.S. supported authoritarian governments around the world, from Latin America, such as Cuba, to Southeastern Asia, like South Korea. After China fell to communism by Soviet influence in 1949, it was apparent that containment was no longer a viable option. U.S. foreign policy underwent a drastic change from nonviolent practices to military intervention. The Korean and Vietnam War were two of the many proxy wars fought between the U.S. and the USSR in the name of their ideologies. At the height of the Cold War, there was immense tensions between the U.S. and the USSR. Events like the Bay of Pigs invasion and subsequent Cuban Missile Crisis almost prompted another world war. Though the USSR collapsed in 1991, U.S. foreign policy could not return to its isolationist state pre-World War II. The Heartland Theory and the Rimland Theory are two prevailing theories concerning the control over the world island, which is the mega-continent of Afro-Eurasia. The Heartland Theory, proposed by British geopolitician Halford Mackinder, states, "Who rules East Europe commands the Heartland. Who rules the Heartland commands the world island. Who rules the world island commands the world." On the other hand, the Rimland Theory, proposed by American geopolitician Nicholas Spikeman, states that, "Who controls the Rimland controls Eurasia, and who controls Eurasia controls the destinies of the world." Furthermore, the authors of American foreign policy since World War II, John W. Spanier and Stephen W. Hook, state, as the Heartland power sought domination over Eurasia, if not the world island, which have made it the dominant global power, the offshore naval power sought control of Eurasian rimlands in order to dent that domination to the Heartland power, and thereby contain it. Thus, one reason for the post-war conflict was geopolitical. Russian land power expanded, but was countered by the countervailing power exerted from a maritime nation. These clashes occurred along the perimeter from Turkey to Iran and then in Western Europe. The assertion of the Heartland and Rimland theories, along with writing from Spanier and Hook, explains the actions of the two world powers. But what if the U.S. never entered World War II? Undoubtedly, American historians such as Bevan Alexander and Philip Burnham claim that the Axis powers would have won the war. Major countries like Russia, China, France, and the United Kingdom would fall under the grip of the Axis control. Due to this, multiple international organizations that the United States helped founded and is a part of, like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the United Nations, would not exist. The United States would not have abandoned its isolationist policy for an interventionist policy. Armed neutrality would be the most plausible stance on foreign policy after World War II. The United States' influence would be restricted to the Western Hemisphere. Thus, the United States would have not entered Korea and Vietnam if those wars sparked up under Axis control. There would be no reason for the Bay of Pigs invasion and subsequent Cuban Missile Crisis situations to occur because the USSR would not be a superpower. Our closest European allies would cease to be our allies, and alliances the United States forged after the war would have never been crafted. Like the alliances the U.S. established with Germany and Japan after the war when the United States decided to help rebuild and industrialize the two countries. Those a part of the Axis powers would rise respectively in their areas. Japan and Germany would not be technological giants like today, but rather be major military powers. Since the US would have armed neutrality, with zero involvement in the war, America would not be able to recover from the Great Depression as quickly as it did due to the positive results of World War II. United States' involvement in World War II forever altered its foreign policy with the world. For without it, the United States would have not converted from a conservative federalist state to a major global head in foreign policy in the way that it did.